Hello and welcome to Off the Track. I am Peter Russell, and today I'm joined by Ben Galvin, George Stonor,
Hi.
Jesse Stevens,
Yo.
Mathew Fleming,
Hello.
Michael Walker,
Hello.
and Tobias Astill-King. Thank you for that. Now, onto something a bit more serious. Today, we're going to be talking about something a bit more serious. We're going to be talking about COVID-19, or the novel coronavirus. And there's been a lot of discussion recently about whether events are going to go ahead or not. And we've had a lot of sort of developments within the past weeks. And we put out a question on our Instagram the other day, asking what are your concerns, and the majority of you are asking whether the World Finals are going to go ahead. Hydron is, they're concerned about Worlds, if they're going to go, that they might be cancelled. Other people are saying, when will Worlds be held, or will they cancel it this season? Another person says, what are the chances that the World Finals will get cancelled? Will the World Finals get cancelled, etc., etc., etc. Everyone's a bit concerned at the moment. We don't have any answers to give you, but we can sort of discuss what has happened and what may happen in the future. But we don't know anything for certain. I don't think anyone does. So there's been a lot of impact on events, especially the national finals that are occurring at this time. The Australian national finals went ahead last week or 2 weeks ago when you're hearing this. They just went ahead. They were almost cancelled, but luckily they did go ahead.
1 week later, I think they'd have been cancelled. Like if they were scheduled
definitely.
a week later.
Yeah, even a day later, because the Grand Prix was getting cancelled effectively that day. So I think they would have had to. It was a health.
Yeah.
I don't think they should have gone ahead, but they went ahead anyway.
So we've seen the Indian national finals, the German national finals, as well as the UK national finals. They've all been postponed. At the Cyprus national final, teams have been asked to submit their competition elements in advance. However, the event itself has been postponed. Also in the UK, teams have been asked to submit all their competition elements by mid-May, which is an extension on what was originally planned. And interestingly, the UK organisers are also asking teams to make arrangements so that they continue.
I also believe the German national finals are going to be virtual.
Okay.
It was the German and the Irish ones, as far as I know. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. So that was going to be mailed in, and the cars would be raced automatically.
Okay. And how would they conduct judging? Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I think they're doing it for some of the German regionals as well that they haven't managed to conduct yet.
All right, yep.
So were they going to do video calls for judging, I assume? Would there be no judging at all?
I dare say we'd get probably a Skype-like conference for certain elements, such as the verbal presentation, and all the other judging elements. I can't remember. But I think it's pretty safe to say that it will go ahead, but as a virtual sort of thing, much like what Formula One are doing with the not Bahrain GP.
I mean, that's more Lando Norris.
There is an official F1 sanctioned virtual race, though.
Well, F1 are supporting the Lando Norris one, which was then supported by Veloz, is it?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
We've seen around the world, schools have been closed. In the UK, they were closed on Friday. In Australia, it's pretty much imminent this week that they're going to be closed. Going into the
New South Wales is closing their schools.
Oh, that's been announced, has it?
Yeah,
No,
I'm pretty sure. I swear it has.
They said that at the very least they're going to be open Monday, and then they're going to say something else later.
Yeah.
Right.
In Victoria, they're off on Tuesday for the foreseeable future, and predictions are that they're going to be closed for at least 6 months, which is a major impact for F1 in schools, especially for teams that are going to the World Final, if there is a World Final. No one knows when it's going to be held, if it does go ahead.
This also presents challenges for, say, teams that would have been formed this year to compete in state finals, and has a domino effect on the national finals next year.
Yeah.
Schools won't probably open until the start of next year, realistically, because
Yeah.
all of the vaccines and all of the correct procedures won't be fully into effect till the end of the year. So I don't think there'll be a chance that the schools will be open so people can work together.
There's a good chance that vaccines will be more like end of next year.
Yeah. No one
realistically.
knows how long it's going to last.
But there'll be antiviruses and things well before then.
So the UK organisers, they're exploring two scenarios, as we just mentioned, in other countries: a virtual competition and a regular physical competition.
Now, the virtual one's interesting because we've already
Yeah.
discussed a virtual competition on the podcast. Way back on top of that episode too. It was just Peter, Ben, and I.
Yeah.
But we discussed it as a possible route to do the continental finals. That we were discussing at the time, and where teams submit all these materials by post or online and that kind of thing, and they're judged via Skype calls and that kind of thing. I think we concluded that it was probably a bit impractical, but I mean, in these times, I think it's almost necessary if they want the competition to continue. I don't think it's likely that they'd write this whole season off as a fail due to coronavirus.
What parts of the competition actually require a physical presence?
Somewhat pit displays, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Reaction racing.
Well, that doesn't. There would be a way of you could send out standardized testing equipment where people could just do a reaction.
There's an issue of trust there, though.
Yeah,
I feel like that would get a bit pricey as well if you're sending a bunch of people.
The best thing to do would just be to.
Yeah, but you'd be looking at doubling that, Jesse. Like $1,000 to enter the competition, yeah, but then the equipment and the sending it out, that would cost a lot of money as well.
But you no longer have to hold it in a ballroom. So your costs of renting out a facility massively reduced.
I think there would be concerns about cheating as well, though. Sorry, George.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. Just well, the UK have implied that if it does go to a virtual event, that they'll refund teams with the money that they're not spending on a location, on hiring out a venue. So I think they would have a reduced budget from that.
Yeah, it depends whether they're going to refund the whole thing or not. Whether they're going to refund just what they would have spent on a venue and keep the rest, or whether it's the whole thing.
Yeah, well, they implied they would. I mean, in one email, it implies that they'll give back the entire fee that teams are paid. But I'm not. Yeah, I mean, if you're not holding a physical event, I'm not. In terms of what costs they have, I'm not sure how many need to be covered by the event fee that teams pay.
But I think a virtual event will make a lot of sense. Maybe not even this year, but in the coming years, as the economic landscape gets a lot more dire, there'll be a lot less money for teams to get from sponsors, especially in businesses that support the teams. So I think it's a lot more likely that virtual competitions will reduce the costs for all teams to enter, which makes it a lot easier to host national finals still, and people aren't in significant economic trouble because they had to go to the competition.
But going back to the impacts of COVID, even beyond just holding the event itself, the teams preparing are going to have a lot of trouble if, say, they're not allowed at school to manufacture their cars.
And getting sponsorship will be a lot harder.
Yeah, we've had a few questions on our Instagram. Mobius Racing, they're concerned that their sponsor rejection rates might go up. Frontier Racing are concerned that the sponsorships and suppliers getting their funds and products for the AU national final was hard enough. It'll probably be worse now. Team Vanderblack, they're saying that it's difficult to do the activities we used to do, like doing fundraisers, etc., that they're now stuck at home. It'll be very difficult for teams to seek sponsorship. And especially as we're going towards an economic crisis, businesses are probably going to be less likely to give out money to teams anyway.
Oh, yeah. I feel like we may see... I mean, it definitely presents a new interesting challenge, to say the least, with the competition. But I feel like that it will have to evolve and change over this season if it's going to go ahead and survive the pandemic.
We've seen teams have had, their supply chains disrupted, especially with sourcing uniforms. We saw that at the Australian national final. Teams were saying, we can't get our uniforms because they're manufactured in China, and our suppliers haven't been able to give us to them on time. So there's a lot of implications beyond just holding the event itself.
And it's a shame that F1 in schools is quite a young competition, because we could have looked back to what happened in 2008, 2009, and that kind of thing. But it was very small back then, and in the UK, pretty much only in the UK. I think there was some Australian stuff back in 2009, maybe, but it was very small.
Australians were before 2009.
Yeah, we go back to 06.
Okay,
But it was
right.
nowhere near as bad as this.
Yeah.
No.
And so, that will give you some idea, but I think we'll see the sponsorship pool for the next couple of years dry up significantly, and that could hinder the number of teams that are able to attend Worlds. Even if the Worlds is held, you might see fewer countries sending fewer teams.
Well, teams already had to go above and beyond to get sponsors in this landscape when the economic landscape was really good. So now, when no companies are willing to spend money and there's very few sponsors that have any money at the moment, there's no chance of getting sponsors, I think.
Yeah, and just speaking on that, like you said, looking back at, say, 2008, even with how small the competition was, you can still see the impact that it had, at least on the podium. Like, in 2004, the podium was America, South Africa, and Australia, and that was the same in 2006. But then you go to 2008, and it's just England, Australia. And Scotland managed to get second place at 2007. But you don't really see those smaller, those nations that would have struggled more with the financial crisis
Where were they held?
succeeding. Coventry, Birmingham, Melbourne, Kuala Lumpur 2008, 2009 London.
But a couple in probably 2022, the economy will probably skyrocket, because that's usually what happens after a crisis, a couple of years. So that might end up being a really good situation for the competition.
But who knows how long this is going to last? People are saying 6 months. That's best scenario. Could be a year, maybe. We're going to be stuck in isolation, maybe. Who knows?
Lovely. I mean, I'm not stuck in isolation yet, but
not yet. But
I'm not sure that I'm looking forward to the time that I am, because
this is just a little off topic, but could I just ask, what's the difference between teams from England and the UK, and teams that represent the UK versus teams that represent England? Because even just on
that's
the
always
page,
confused
you can
me.
see some teams like Colossus represented England, whereas teams like Evolve UK were representing UK, and you could see that on the banners as you walked across the pit displays.
Yeah.
Well, this confused us. I mean, we spent the entire thing. We spent the entire competition walking around with the English flag rather than the UK flag.
Yeah.
Because we were under the assumption we were going as English champions, because technically we were. But then, I think the main problem came from there being 2 Evolve teams, and they were Evolve Australia, and we got given the name Evolve UK. But it's sort of, because I think the whole, so it all got very confusing, but I think the whole thing stems from, in the world's rules, it's something like each country can't send more than 3 people, or 3 teams. And the UK goes, well, we're formed of different countries, so we can get around that. I think it's basically the UK.
That's what the UK is. It's a country of countries, geopolitically.
Yeah.
The UK trades as a country, but internally, Scotland, England, and Wales are all, sorry, Northern Ireland, you're not a country. They're all countries.
What? Okay, wow, that's a
No,
massive.
I think
legitimately
Wales
are
isn't a
not.
country.
No, Wales is. They don't
No,
have
it's
a
not.
parliament
It's a
anymore.
principality, actually.
No, I'm pretty sure Wales is still a country.
No, it's legally part of England.
Yeah,
okay.
England and Wales is like, kind of one.
I mean,
Okay.
well, Wales has its own devolved government.
Because they're legally a country of countries, they try and skirt it with that. Maybe we should just make New South Wales into a country inside Australia for, F1 in schools reasons.
So if Britannia Red had gone through, they would have been representing UK as the UK champions, right?
Yeah.
Speaking
And then-
of which, what was your impressions of them?
So I'm not exactly sure where they placed in points-wise, but I know that both us and Centurion, we were 1-2 points-wise, but we both broke criticals. And so we dropped down to second and third. And then the top place team that didn't break a critical jumped to first, because those were the old rules. And so Britannia Red were first. I mean, they were very good, but I think compared to us and Centurion, they were much younger. And I think I got the impression their plan wasn't to go to Worlds in 2019 anyway. So I think they've come back this year, and the idea was they've got much more experience now. So if everything, if the World Finals do take place, they'll have I think the idea was they'd be able to give the World Finals a much better shot at placing well. I think that was their plan. And judging them this year at regionals, they do look very strong.
And of course, they were just afraid to compete with you guys again.
Of course, yeah. But no, it's a bit confusing. So yeah.
Okay, so I think on the topic of the World Finals happening this year, it's very unlikely that travel bans will be lifted by the time a likely, more probable. I think REA said that the original World Finals are going to happen in Singapore in September or early October. I don't remember when the Grand Prix is this year, but I don't.
Well,
think
that's probably
really
been pushed
likely.
back now. So
I don't know if the Singapore GP happening will be likely to begin with, and secondly, if that would be by the time everything will happen, or by the time travel bans will be lifted. Next year would probably be the first time that the competition could actually run. It's more likely that teams will be able to compete in national finals, but not world finals, because inter-country travel bans won't be lifted, but interstate ones probably will be. So would it be a possibility that teams could maybe compete in national finals, and then after you have two national finals, and then there's one big world finals for those 2 years together?
that would be interesting. But how
So
many
you'd
teams
have about
would you
100
send?
teams.
Yeah, something like that. That would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Think of the ballroom in Singapore, right? Oh crap! Did you go to Singapore? You were at Singapore, weren't you, Jesse? Or you were Texas?
No, I went to Texas.
Okay, well, the ballroom at Singapore, it's possible. Let me put it this way: it's possible because that ballroom was a bigger ballroom, so it's possible that they have enough space. It's whether they have enough time and that kind of thing. They need to span the competition out over basically another day or two to get through it, and then you have this whole thing about just so many teams. You've got.
You need more judges.
Yeah, you need more judges and that kind of thing. And can they pull in enough of that infrastructure to support double the amount of teams?
Okay.
They could implement. They could implement things from maybe virtual final. So if you had to process 100 teams, rather than having to judge verbal presentations, everyone could send in a video or things like that. If they really had to get through 100 teams in a shorter time span.
Or even just reduce some of the elements that aren't worth a lot of points, like the pit display. I don't know how many points that was worth this year or last year, but that's still a really bulky item that takes up a lot of space, and a lot of team and that takes up like a third of the pit display or the third of the total ballroom size. If you reduce teams having to set that up, that frees up more judges to judge other parts of the competition.
Is that even a third? I think it's more like a half, to be honest, from what I remember. At least at Singapore, it was definitely half.
It is a decent
Our
size.
ballroom it took up third, I think, Jesse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The chairs were the main thing.
Yeah.
Okay. What if? Now here's a big hypothetical. What if we see the early introduction of continental regional finals to perhaps reduce the amount of teams competing, and instead sending 2 years worth of teams at one continental finals to then limit the amount of teams going to a world finals?
My question would also be, like, couldn't the competition just run for a longer span so they can, say, double the competition length? So maybe instead of it finishes on, say, it starts on the Saturday and goes to the following Thursday, rather than doing it all in that 3-day space. So you could process double the amount of teams in double the amount of time, which would keep the same.
Trying to get judges for that long, though, and that kind of thing.
But if they held the World Finals in, say, Australia, there's a huge judge pool that would be willing to help out.
I was thinking that maybe they could use this as an opportunity to shift the time that the World Finals is at later to a different point in the year. So then we could get in. It could be during different Grand Prix that it normally can't be, and then so maybe the World Finals could be, March, April, May, that kind of area, and they can go to all these other GPs that they normally don't have access to, so that it's not just Singapore, Abu Dhabi, Texas on loop.
Well, the thing that doesn't make sense to me is that they've got, say, Australia, the UK, and Germany all have really good. Well, I mean, Germany doesn't have a Grand Prix this year, but say Australia and England both have really extensive pools of judges that can help out and people that would be willing to help out at the Worlds. But they're not willing to spend $2,000 or $3,000 on a trip to a World Finals out of the country, but they'd be willing to make the trip to a local World Finals. So I think that would reduce, and there's a lot more teams that compete. Say if you held a final in Europe, all the European teams could roughly travel. They're a lot cheaper than having to fly all the way out to a remote location. I think it makes a lot of sense to move it to a more common location where either you can reduce the load on the judges or the economic burden on the judges, or reduce the load on the economic load on the teams.
The thing that makes sense about Singapore and Abu Dhabi is that a lot of the teams that are from developing nations, particularly in like the Middle East and that, it's less expensive for them to travel to those two places than it would be to the UK or Australia. And the economically advantageous teams from Europe and Australia, it would be much cheaper for them to go there. So I think it evens out the playing field, although increasing the cost overall for everyone. I think it evens out the playing field for everyone by doing that.
So my response to that is, though, why should all the teams that come from, I don't know, say Australia, we have to spend 30 Australian dollars, or 30,000 Australian dollars to get over to the finals?
Well, the idea there is that it is much easier for teams from Australia to acquire that money than a team from a nation where the businesses wouldn't be as willing to give out money, where the financial situation is much more struggling.
But if you've ever actually interacted with any of the teams from the developing countries, they're usually some of the richer teams at the competition, because the sponsorship pool's a lot bigger. They've usually got some backing from the government that's a lot more substantial than the backing that developed countries can get.
And beyond that, these countries, it's not just like the entire population is poor or anything like that. And the students that would be competing in these sorts of things from those sorts of countries would tend to be more wealthy, from more wealthy backgrounds anyway.
So it makes a lot. I feel like it makes a lot more sense, because a lot of the schools in Australia are public schools that enter, and there are a lot of people that don't pay much school fees, and they're not, super well off. So why are
that
those
was
people getting
something
asked?
that was something that we experienced coming from a rather low socioeconomic area. Luckily, we got paired up with Penrith Christian School, so we managed to cover most of the sponsorship funds.
Well, we were very lucky because we got a lot of government funding. If we didn't get the government funding, we would have been royally screwed, and I don't think any of us would have made it to the Worlds.
I think we're lucky to have got both our state governments as well as the national funding. That was very helpful.
That was, it was the same with us. We had a fairly large grant from, I think it was Oz Industry. Like they were.
And we've seen, other STEM competitions such as the first robotics competition as well as Vex Robotics. They've postponed their seasons. We haven't heard anything yet from
Well,
F1
to be fair,
about the
you don't
World
have several billion students competing.
Yeah.
No,
True.
Oh, there's a
Topic.
picture of the Evolve guys.
Yeah. So we've
Alrighty.
gone through the
Where's
financial
Ascension?
implications.
Come on.
I think we're literally mostly done with this episode, to be honest.
Yeah, this is just like a bonus episode.
yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, this is a
recording-
very, the situation developing day by day, pretty much. Who knows?
Okay, we're going
What's
to call
gonna
this a bonus episode so that the
Only on our Patreon.
Patreon exclusive.
Patreon exclusive, yeah.
All right, well, thank you for listening to Off the Track this episode. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, you can rate the show on Apple Podcasts.
5 stars. Come on,
Yep.
someone needs to do it because no one's done it yet.
It's very
I would
important,
if I had
apparently.
Yeah,
If you do it and send us a screenshot, we will.
we'll do
Be very
something.
grateful.
Yeah,
we'll
that.
do some. We will thank you personally in your Instagram DMs. We will give you the Infinitude car files.
No, we won't.
No, we will
Make
not.
sure to follow us on Instagram at Off the Track Podcasts, and you can visit us at our website, www.offthetrack.net. Make sure you're washing your hands, practice social distancing.
Wash
and we
your
hope
hands,
to see you
dirty pig.
in the next episode.
Bye.
Thank you, Eric, for that.
You're welcome, Otis.
All right.
See you next time.